The ancient word that we have this morning is from Lamentations chapter 3, verses 21 through 23, and I'll be reading from the NRSV. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of God never ceases, whose mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Our contemporary word comes from a letter that was written by our Board of Elders, a pastoral letter that was issued some time ago. And it reads, or an excerpt of it reads as this: to be a part of the UFMCC is to share in the strength and wonder of one of the most powerful and liberating movements in Christian history. As the people of God gathered together in this movement, and we are co-creators with God. Hear that again. We are co-creators with God of a new thing God is doing. We are a part of a movement for which people have died, for which others will die, and to which many more are devoting their lives. Together we find the increased strength and support that comes through identity and cohesion with a larger movement, bringing about positive change in the world. We gain strength in numbers and strength from our unity in diversity. The whole is more than the sum of its parts. As people of the covenant, we recount with joy the ways in which God has acted, reflect on our faithfulness to God's call, and rededicate ourselves to the vision God has for us. This morning, we are entering in the fourth week of the anniversary celebrations of Metropolitan Community Church. And we have this theme that we had published many months ago. And it just happened that on today, on week 4, we focus on the theme of hope. Now, we had no idea months ago, and we here at St. John's had no idea weeks ago as we looked through and continued to pore over the elements that would be this worship experience this morning. We had no idea that the events of this past week would have unfolded the way that they did. So I find once again, or yet again, a stark reminder of the divine wisdom and power of God, that God worked in and through us, and in and through our denomination, in and through God's people, to have us focus on hope this morning. Something that I think is very, very on time. Hope, if we look at the definition, is a feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen, or a feeling of trust. And all of a sudden I'm taken back to Genesis, where we said, and let there be light. Or we can look at it as to want something to happen or to be the case. Today, as we focus on hope, let us open ourselves up to understand this in a different way, to understand what hope really is all about. More importantly, understand just how important hope is in our lives each and every day. I'll lift up for us the topic this morning, how our purpose empowers. The book of Lamentations is a collection of poetic works that describe a time in history when Jerusalem has been destroyed, has been on this roller coaster of emotions, if you will. And we can kind of get an idea of what that is like as we read through there and we hear these stories of a city that has been brought to ruin, great pain and suffering and destruction everywhere, people that are in utter disbelief, confused and hopeless, people that have lost all hope and that can't really see how it's going to get any better. maybe if we think about those words, we don't have to go all the way back to 586 BC to find that same situation still very true in the lives of so many people. We don't have to look but so far back in our own histories, and we find destruction, people in hopeless places. We see folks that have gone on this roller coaster of a ride, trying to figure out where I fit in society. Do I belong? How can I belong? Fighting for their rights. In 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified, granting women the right to vote. That was certainly a time of celebration because there's a major milestone that has been hit. But let us be reminded that it came after the work of nearly 100 years. After nearly 100 years of work, this finally came to pass. And during that movement, during that 100 years of movement, think about the roller coaster that women went on. The 14th Amendment was ratified during that same time, defining citizens as male. While you are fighting for your right to simply count and to vote and to be equal, there's a constitutional amendment that is put into place that says that to be a citizen or to define a citizen as a male. Certainly, that put a bit of a damper on what was and what continues to be a powerful movement. People fighting for their rights and having stumbling blocks thrown in along the way. In 1865, the 13th Amendment was ratified to abolish slavery, though there was still and still is a long and hard struggle. 1948, President Truman issued an executive order to end segregation in the armed forces. And in 1954, we had Brown versus Board of Education. And in 1955, Rosa Parks took a stand. Or actually, rather, she took a seat. And she chose not to give up that seat and stirred a movement. In 1957, 60 black pastors gathered in Atlanta to coordinate nonviolent protest against racial discrimination and segregation. In 1964, college students in Greensboro, North Carolina, took a stand as they sat at the counter that was listed for whites only at Woolworth and demanded to be treated equally and fairly. In 1964, President Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law, preventing employment discrimination due to race, color, sex, religion, or national origin. These are certainly milestones in the civil rights movement, certainly groundbreaking events that happened along the way that continued to fuel people's desire and urge to fight. But that fight was met with great resistance. Within a year after the passing of the act there in 1964, you had Malcolm X, who was shot and killed. You had Selma in the march in Montgomery, Alabama, when police met the marchers and brutally attacked. 4 years after that act was passed, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. It was a roller coaster that people engaged in, having ups and downs, having great victories and then great losses, but always moving forward, always keeping hope, and somebody along the way to remind them that hope is very much alive. Somebody saying that it's okay, we're going to continue this fight. I've been reminded over and over again this year, it just keeps coming back to me, the words that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said in one of his very last speeches. He said, I see the promised land, and we as a people will get there. I may not get there with you, but we as a people will get there. He knew what it was to have hope and promise for a new day, hope and promise for something that was going to be different, hope and promise for something that was going to be rooted in love for all people. Marriage equality in the United States has certainly been on the same struggle, or as some would say, the same struggle bus. It has been up and down. And that fight goes back all the way to the 1950s. We don't realize it started that long ago, but it goes back to the 1950s. And it wasn't until 2004 when the first state allowed same-sex marriage. And it wouldn't be until 2015 when all states would honor same-sex marriage. But yet today, that right, that basic human right, still comes under attack and is still challenged. And if we sit back on our blessed assurances and think we ain't got nothing to worry about, we'll find ourselves shocked and surprised. I would also remind us that it wasn't until 1967 that interracial marriage was legal in all states. Over and over and over again in our history, we see these times of great roller coaster rides that we have been on in our fight for freedom and our fight for justice. We see these times of great destruction, these times that people are left out feeling like there is no hope for them. We are faced continuously, for some people every single day, with facing that fear, with facing that destruction. The nightmare right now, as I told with the 9 o'clock folks, the nightmare that is our political climate. Now, I've told them this morning, I'll tell y'all the same thing, just so it won't even kill. I'm keeping it transparent. If I have to hear that woman one more time get on the television and talk about how her man in Congress is the right one to vote for because his opponent is for sanctuary cities, and sanctuary cities in her mind are there to allow criminals to run rampant. Now, I'm paraphrasing all that. If y'all watch TV, you know exactly which commercial I'm talking about. I ain't for or against any political party, but I can tell you I'm tired of hearing the rhetoric. I'm tired of hearing this back and forth banter that is destructive and that are outright lies and deception. I'm tired of hearing it. Something has to change. We know what it's like to be on the roller coaster. This up and down, up and down. I have rights today, I may not have them tomorrow. I got to keep fighting, I got to do this, I got to do that. The discrimination and the hate that continues to be on the rise. Mass violence and terrorism that continuously happen. And it's become a household topic, an everyday occurrence. We were here at a meeting yesterday, and when we finished that meeting, Fred tells me, he said, there's been a shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. And all I could muster the strength to say was, how many are dead? That is our reality that we live in. Where is the hope in that? Another shooting. It just becomes second nature for us to say it. Where is the hope in that? When we look at what we have done, I think when we talk about this roller coaster of events, when we look at just the last few days here in our country, I think we can kind of see this roller coaster in full effect. On Friday morning, several of us gathered here and in sanctuaries across the country and community centers, and a good group of people met at the National Cathedral. And they had a memorial service and followed by an interment for Matthew Shepard. And they had this welcome home message. We're saying, welcome home. There is a place for you here. And the bishop said, for people who have been hurt by the church, welcome home. There's a place for you here. There's a place for you here. Sharing a message of love. A great milestone in the history of the church. A great milestone in the history of the church to get to that point. Yet there is so much work yet to be done. Because We also had, around the same time, a man who showed up at a church in Kentucky, intent on killing people. Tried to get into the church, and fortunately the church was locked and they wouldn't let him in, or he couldn't get into the church, so he left there and he went to the Kroger grocery store nearby, and he shot and killed 2 other people. He was quoted at the church as saying, "Whites don't kill whites." And it was a white man that went on to kill 2 African-American people at the grocery store. 2 people who showed up to probably pick up bread and whatever else we would normally go to the grocery store to pick up, and will never make it home. Not to their earthly house. Because of somebody who was intent on spreading hatred and racism. On yesterday, 11 folks lost their lives simply by showing up to their place of worship on their Sabbath day. Simply worshiping God in the way they know how to worship God. And somebody intent on spreading racism and spreading hatred and discrimination and oppression showed up with a gun. Shot and killed 11. I think there were 6 other that were wounded and countless others that are hurt. A country that is crippled in grief. When we stop to think about these things that are going on in our lives, in these roller coasters, celebrating great victory, but at the same time having to stop and celebrate life and mourn loss because of this devastation that is being wreaked, this havoc that continues to overcome the people of this country. We have to say enough is enough. We have to stand and say that this can't continue to happen. We keep talking about all these issues that get plastered all over the media. That there's I think we call it a caravan of immigrants is how the media is portraying it. A caravan that's making their way through Mexico and trying to flee their country of origin that has discriminated and hurt. They're trying to make their way here, and there's those who would say that they're not welcome here. We're going to close the borders. We see people in need. We see people hurting. We're going to close the borders. I would submit for us this morning that we're being fed a line of stuff. We're being fed a line. We don't have an immigration problem in America. We don't have a Republican problem in America. Some of y'all probably scratching your head on that one. We don't have a Democratic problem or a Libertarian problem or whatever other affiliation you want to align with. What we have is a problem of racism. We have a problem of stigmatization of people who are oppressed and people who are different than us. We have a problem where people and governments and institutions try to stand up and tell you how to live your life and try to demonize anything that is other than you because they know in separating us and segregating us that they take our power away. We have a problem of systemic oppression in this country that continues. That all the struggles that we have fought over the years is because of systemic racism, systemic oppression, and division that is continuously fed to us. Continuously fed to us, and it's fed right into our living rooms now through the course of TV. I'm starting to think back on some of the folks that I knew growing up that didn't believe in having TV in the house. I'm starting to question whether or not I want one in my house with some of the stuff that comes out through that thing. We don't have a problem with immigration in the country. The problem comes when institutions that try to tell us who's okay to be here and who's not, that try to tell us who's worthy to receive assistance and aid and who's not. We have a problem when we have systems that try to tell us that you are any less than I am because of the color of your skin or where you grew up at or your country of origin or who you love or how you love. That's where our problem comes in. And until we get to the heart of the problem, it's going to continue to exist. It's going to continue to exist. And oftentimes we get in the midst of all these things that happen, and we want to know, well, what can we do? What can we do to make any difference in all that's going on in the world? Well, some of us are going to say, well, we got to pray. Well, that's right. We do have to pray. But it don't stop there. The people who are continuously injured and killed by gun violence need more than our prayers. Our trans brothers and sisters who are continuously murdered for living into who they are need more than our prayers. They need our action. When we stop and we ask, well, what can we do? We have to start to understand this thing called hope in a different way. We have to understand this thing of hope and fully embrace it and fully live into it. We have to understand that when we start to move into this space where we can embrace hope, that it is us. There ain't nobody else coming. It is us that has to spread that message of hope and of love. When you get in trouble or somebody's trying to break into your house, you dial 911 and you're waiting on somebody to get there, right? When you get in a car crash, you dial 911, you wait, and they send the right resources, right? They have a whole system in place that determines that. You call, you answer a few questions, or a whole lot of questions, depending on the center, and they pick which resources you need and they send them. Let me tell you something. God's using us as the resources to be sent. The calls are being made. What are we doing to respond? The calls are being made when our trans brothers and sisters are being murdered. The calls are being made when our Jewish sisters and brothers show up to a worship service and are murdered. The call is being made when we got people that are sending bombs across the country because of people's political affiliation. The call is there. The call has been made. And the dispatch center is sending you. Are you hearing that call, and are you responding to that call? When we stop and we look at this hope and we understand how our purpose empowers, it is our purpose that we go out and we share this message of love and of hope. It is our purpose that we get out and be about the business of God, being that voice of love, that voice of hope for those around us who are hurting, that voice of love and that voice of hope for our own selves in cases when we're hurting. That is our call. We have to stop and we have to understand that when we live into our purpose, when we stop and we take time to understand what our purpose is and we live fully into that purpose, it becomes empowering. It empowers us to be able to do what God has called us to do. It empowers us to be able to get up and go and be about the business of God. It fulfills us because if we're being called to do something, or if we have a purpose and we're not fulfilling it, most of us know that there's something that just feels uncomfortable about that until we start moving in the direction of doing it. And the further we run from it, the more uncomfortable it gets in some cases. And we keep running and we keep trying to get away from it. And we dabble back into it just to appease and come on back. But when we fully immerse ourselves into that purpose, it empowers us to be all of who God called and created us to be. I think I said this morning, it allows us to be fully and wholly, both W-H-O-L-L-Y and H-O-L-Y. It allows us to be wholly who God called and created us to be and to fulfill our purpose. The other thing that our purpose does to empower is it empowers others. When we live into our calling or into our yes, it gives other people the courage to live into that call. It gives other people the courage to say yes and to say, yeah, there is a way. There is hope. There is hope for even me to be able to live fully into what it is that God called and created me to do and to be. When we look at the story of Rosa Parks, she lived fully into her purpose. And in doing so, she empowered a people. to be able to go out and to live into their purposes and to stand for what is right. We live into our purpose, we empower the community around us. When we live fully into our purpose, we're going to empower the community around us to be able to go out and be about the work that we are called to do. Each one of us coming together to do that work. Reverend Troy Perry, when he answered a call and lived into his purpose, and those that came along with him and came there in those early days, living into the purpose God had called and created them for, they started a movement that we now know as Metropolitan Community Churches. We had the luxury to be able to, and the extreme honor to be able to sit here in this space just a few weeks ago with those who had been called and had the purpose to plant what would become St. John's Metropolitan Community Church. Answering yes to their call, empowered an entire community to be able to do the work that God had called them to do. And it's because of that community, because of this community, that thousands of people are literally changed. Their lives are saved. Not the salvation that the Pentecostal church probably taught us, but they have been saved because they have found love. We talked some about the door handles that are hanging there in the back on a plaque in this sanctuary, still there today. I encourage you to still stop by and look at them. We talked about that last week. And we talked about the thousands of hands that touched those door handles over the years, coming into a space looking to find hope. Some of those hands, including mine, touched those handles at one point and opened those doors, using the last bit of hope that they had to try to find a place that was sharing God's love. When we allow ourselves to be open, to understand this love thing in a different way, this hope in a different way, and we understand that it is our call to be the voice of hope. It is our call to go out and to share with others. I've had conversations just this past week, and some including this morning, with folks who struggle because the church has hurt them greatly. And some of these folks have great and amazing gifts and talents, but they don't use them because they've been told that they don't belong. They've been told. One person told me that the only exposure I have to a church is when I go to Pride and they stand and tell me that I'm going to hell. That's the only exposure I've ever had or have in recent years with a church. There is work to be done. There is work yet to be done by us living into our purpose, by us understanding how our purpose empowers us and empowers those around us and empowers our communities. We can change lives. It's not hard. There's a lot of work to do, but it's not hard. We do it by first allowing us to be us, allowing ourselves to be fully and wholly committed to living our fullest life, to being all of who God called and created us to be, and then simply sharing God's love, sharing that message of hope with all of those around us, understanding that there is power in our purpose, understanding that there are thousands and thousands of people that are still waiting to hear a message of love right here in our own communities that are looking. We've had a long saying that we've used quite a lot here at this church over the years, that you may be the only Bible that somebody reads today. What are they reading? When that last ounce of hope is used to open the door handles, to come in, what are they finding? And that doesn't just apply to this place. When the last ounce of hope they have is used to open the doors of your heart out on the street corner when it's 30 degrees outside, what are they finding when they come inside? And I'll close with this. I find it an amazing journey to be able to ask folks what it is you found when you came to St. John's that holds you here. What is the most profound thing that you recall about this place? What is it that keeps you coming back? And overwhelmingly, people tell me it was the warm welcome that I got. It was that family feeling, that love that was shared with me when I walked through the doors, that feeling of immense joy. I finally found a place that I belong. That's what people tell me when they say, this is what I found when I came to St. John's. I found a place of love, a place that loved me just as I am, a place that didn't require me to be different when I walked through the doors. They didn't come back because the music was real good. They didn't come back because the preaching was real good. They didn't come back because the preacher preached too short or preached too long. I don't know how I'm doing today. I can't see the clock. They don't come for those reasons. They came because of you. What they found amazing about the experience here was each one of you. What brought them back was each one of you. Think to your own time when you first touched those handles walking through this door or through this space. Think to what it felt like. And allow that hope that you found, to empower you to take that message to everyone that you meet and to look for those who are hungry and seeking a place where they can be loved, and show them where they can come. As Brendan, I think, was the one that used to say this the most, just one beggar showing another beggar where they can get some food. Just one beggar trying to show another beggar where they can get some food. How is your purpose empowering you today? How is your purpose empowering those around you today? How is your purpose empowering your community today? Amen.